Welcome, dear dreamer, to Driftwood Stories, where old winds whisper of heroes and stars shimmer on the edge of sleep. Tonight we sail beyond the maps, into the breath of the sea, where oaths are made in moonlight, and courage is woven like sails in the wind. Long ago, in the cradle of ancient Iolcus, a boy was born into silence and storm. His name was Jason, and his fate, like the sea, would stretch far beyond the shore. To reclaim his throne, he must seek a golden thing, not treasure, but truth, held in a far land where dragons guard dreams and fire listens. But Jason will not walk this path alone. He sails with the Argonauts, with hope stitched to their hearts, and songs beneath their breath. So close your eyes now. Feel the tide rise slow. Let the oars begin to move. We are sailing toward the Golden Fleece, but more than that, toward what lies deep within every voyage, the self yet to be discovered. Chapter 1. A Kingdom Lost. There are kingdoms that rise with trumpet calls and fall in smoke, but some are stolen quietly, like a candle snuffed in a sleeping house. So it was in Iolcus. Nestled between the green hills and the wine-dark sea, Iolcus had long been a city of peace. Fishermen sang to the morning, women braided sunlight into their hair. Olive trees whispered secrets to the wind. At the heart of this quiet stood a king, Aeson, gentle, just, with hands more used to lifting children than to lifting swords. His court was one of music, of learning, of festivals where even the poorest ate well. But peace breeds envy in restless hearts. And Aeson's brother, Peleus, was restless indeed. Where Aeson saw seasons, Peleus saw chances. Where Aeson ruled by consent, Peleus craved command. And one autumn morning, when the scent of crushed grapes hung thick in the air, Peleus took the throne by force. Aeson vanished. Some said imprisoned, others said worse. His queen, stricken, fled into the hills. But the child, the newborn boy meant to wear the crown, was saved. Carried under night's cover by a faithful servant, the infant was taken to the sacred slopes of Mount Pantheon. There the stars still shone unbothered by kings, and a teacher waited, neither man nor beast, but both. Chiron, the wise centaur. In his cave of herbs and scrolls, Chiron raised many heroes, but none so quietly, so deliberately as the boy named Jason. Jason did not learn as other boys did. He learned by watching leaves fall, by listening to the stones speak beneath his feet, by asking, always, why. He ran with deer in the glades. He learned the names of clouds and the stars that watched them. He sang the old songs of wind and tide, and though he knew nothing yet of thrones or prophecies, there was a steadiness in him, as if the earth itself had whispered into his bones. "Do not fear greatness," Chiron told him once, "but do not chase it either. Let it come when it must, and meet it with stillness." Years passed. Jason's limbs grew strong. His eyes turned grey, like mist over morning waters. He laughed easily, but when he was silent, the silence felt full. Then, one day, a turning. While walking the low paths beneath Pantheon, Jason came across an old woman by a swollen stream. Her bundle was heavy, the waters fast. "Let me carry you," he said. She said nothing, only nodded. Halfway across, the current surged. Jason stumbled, nearly fell, but he did not drop her. He carried her to the far bank, breathless and soaked. When he set her down, she became something else. You could say her cloak fell away. You could say the air shimmered. Or you could say Jason simply saw her, not an old woman, but a queen of heaven, Hera, goddess of family and oath. "You carry more than you know," she said, voice like spring thunder. "And the gods are watching." Then she vanished, as gods do. Jason looked down and saw his sandal missing, taken by the river, 1 foot bare. He did not understand the meaning. Not yet. That night, Chiron gave him a cloak and a ring once worn by his father. "Your time has come," he said. "Walk with care, speak with kindness, and remember, you are not alone." Jason descended the mountain at dawn. The city of Iolcus was both familiar and foreign. Streets he remembered from boyhood dreams now bore new names. The gates, once open to joy, now opened with suspicion. But the sea still sang beyond the harbour, and Jason walked toward the palace with a quiet certainty. When he entered the throne room, there was no trumpet, no herald. Just Peleus, seated on the high chair like a man clinging to it. His beard was touched with grey, his rings heavy with stone. The courtiers glanced at Jason's feet. 1 sandal, 1 bare. A murmur stirred the air. Peleus's face twitched. "You have returned," he said, "and what do you seek?" Jason met his gaze. "Calm. The throne that is mine by blood." A long pause. Peleus did not rise. He did not threaten. He smiled, thinly, carefully. "Let the gods decide then," he said. "If you are chosen, they will carry you through. Bring me the Golden Fleece, that ancient prize from Colchis, and the crown is yours." The court gasped. Everyone knew the tale. The fleece from a sacred ram given by Hermes hung in a distant land. Colchis, land of sorcerers and dragons. No man had reached it. None had returned. Jason said only, "Then I shall sail." That night, alone beneath the stars, he sat beneath a fig tree his mother had once planted. He touched the ring on his finger. He did not crave gold. He did not even crave power. He wanted to put right what had been twisted. The next morning the sea was still, but the wind had begun to change. Chapter 2. The ship Argo. The sea does not ask why you come. It only asks what you carry. Jason stood upon the pebble shore, salt brushing his ankles, his eyes fixed eastward. Colchis lay far beyond the horizon, past islands that spoke in riddles, past waters where stars did not reflect. To reach it, he would need more than strength. He would need a vessel of purpose, a crew not of soldiers, but of souls. And so, beneath the olive trees of Pagasae, where the tides ran silver and still, he summoned the greatest builder Greece had ever known, Argus, son of Phrixus, the one who had once ridden the flying ram that bore the fleece itself. Argus did not ask questions. He simply nodded. They chose a great oak from the sacred grove of Dodona, a tree that spoke the language of the gods. Jason watched as its heartwood was shaped into the keel, its voice woven into the prow. From that wood came the ship they named Argo. sleek, strong and swift. It was not large, but it sang as it slid into the water, as though the sea recognized something of itself in the curve of her hull. And when she touched the tide, the gods listened. But a ship needs more than wind. It needs people, dreamers, warriors, witnesses. Jason sent word, not to kings, but to kindred. And they came. First, from the hills of Arcadia, came Atalanta, fleet-footed and clear-eyed. Though many doubted her, Jason did not. "Let her run," he said, "and you will see." From the forge fires came Heracles, strong not only in body, but in spirit. He laughed often and carried sorrow like a cloak of smoke. Orpheus, the poet, came with a lyre made from turtle shell and stardust. His songs could calm storms or hearts. Then Castor and Pollux, the twin stars, each a mirror of the other's thought. Meleager, hunter of the boar, Cetes and Calais, sons of the north wind, and even Augeas, who had once ruled stables and now sought redemption. In time they numbered 50, each different, each strange, and all willing to follow Jason, not for glory, but because something in his stillness made them believe. Before they departed, Jason climbed the prow of Argo, laid his hand upon the sacred oak, and whispered, "Speak if danger comes." The wood murmured back, not words, but a feeling, the sense of being watched and blessed. The people of Iolcus gathered along the shore. Some cheered, some wept. Peleus stood above them, offering wine from his balcony, smiling as though he had already won. But Jason did not look back. He turned to his crew, his Argonauts, and spoke not of battle but of bonds. "We will face what comes together," he said, "and let the sea shape us." Then the sails unfurled, the oars lowered, and the Argo slipped into legend. At first the voyage was calm. The waves lapped gently, like lullabies. Orpheus sang to the rhythm of the sea. Atalanta ran the length of the deck in the morning light, her hair streaming behind her like flame. Heracles took turns steering the rudder, his great arms as gentle as a father's touch. And Jason watched, not as a commander, but as a weaver of trust, listening, learning, quietly holding the thread of unity. But the sea is not a path, it is a teacher, and its first lesson was near. On the third day clouds gathered thick, a hush fell over the water, then wind. Not strong, but sudden. The sky darkened. From the prow the oaken beam creaked, once, twice, then spoke. Beware the harbingers of hunger. Moments later, black wings cut the air. Harpies, not demons, but creatures cursed to feed on all they did not eat. They descended in screeches, snatching at the ship's stores, their talons dripping salt. The crew rallied, not with swords alone, but with song. Orpheus rose. His voice, low and even, wound through the noise like thread through needle. The harpies slowed, circled, wept, and vanished. Later they found the coast of Thynia, where an old prophet named Phineus awaited them. Half-starved, harpies his eternal torment. Jason offered bread. Phineus offered warning. "The way ahead is not made of water," he rasped. "It is made of choices." And with that he pointed east, toward the clashing rocks. "The simple gates," he whispered, They crush all who pass, but if your ship is true, it may pass once, and then the path will hold." Jason nodded, and the Argo sailed on. Chapter 3. Trials of the Deep. The sea may look smooth, but it hides old teeth. On the 5th day of the voyage, the Argo sailed beneath a sky as pale as milk, the air warm but tense, as though the waves themselves were waiting. Jason stood at the helm, one hand on the sacred wood, the other on his thoughts. They had passed through storms, escaped the harpies, and earned the blessing of Phineus. But ahead loomed something else entirely. The simple gades, the clashing rocks, two great stone cliffs that loomed from the sea like broken gods. They stood apart, just barely, but when a ship tried to pass, they crashed together with thunder and foam, crushing masts and memory alike. No one had crossed, none but birds. Jason stood before them, the crew silent behind him. Then he released a white dove. It soared between the cliffs, its wings beating against the trembling air. For a breathless moment, nothing. Then, crash. The rocks struck. Spray shot skyward. Silence. Then the dove appeared, one feather lost, but living. Jason did not wait. "Row," he said. The Argonauts leaned into the oars, muscles tight, breath sharp. Orpheus played a rhythm to keep time. Not fast, not slow, but steady. The cliffs groaned. The sea pulled, and the Argo slipped forward. The rocks began to move again. Jason called, "Steady," as the ship slid through the narrow moor. Crash! Behind them. The stern scraped, timbers groaned, but they were through. The rocks slowed, stilled, and the sea breathed once more. Phineus had spoken true. The way, now open, would stay open, for them and for those to follow. But ahead, new trials waited. They sailed on, to the island of Lemnos, where only women lived, queens and craftswomen who had cast out their faithless men. The crew was welcomed with song and spice, bathed and fed. But Jason did not linger. He saw in their kindness the beginning of forgetfulness. He left gently, with gifts exchanged and no promises broken. Next came the land of the Doliones, where King Cyzicus greeted them as brothers. But the gods, mischievous in their winds, stirred the night. As the Argonauts sailed away, a storm drove them back in the dark. Not knowing who they were, the Doliones fought to defend their shores. A battle broke beneath the stars. In morning light, horror dawned. King Cyzicus lay slain by Jason's own blade. The Argonauts buried him with rites. They carved his name into stone, and Jason wept openly, not for politics, not for failure, but for the awful nearness of ruin to intention. "Lead us again," Heracles said after, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We follow not because you win, but because you feel." And Jason did lead, through dark straits where sirens sang, through islands where shadows grew long before noon, through hunger and storm and doubt. In time they reached Bithynia, where a great beast had driven the villagers to ruin. The bulls of bronze, fire-breathing and forged by Hephaestus, roamed the land. But this was no place for battle. Jason approached the villagers not as a hero, but as a guest. He listened, learned their patterns, watched the bulls move not with rage, but in rhythm. He built paths of salt and water. He set mirrors to confuse. He never raised a sword. And the bulls, at last, wandered back to the sea, calm as though never cursed. Each trial wove something into Jason: humility, patience, the courage to pause. Each moment drew the crew closer, not just as Argonauts, but as a whole stitched together by awe and ordeal. One evening, as stars rose like scattered embers, Orpheus played a lullaby to the waves. Jason sat with Atalanta at the prow. "You lead gently," she said. "I doubt," he replied. She smiled. "That's why we trust you." Behind them the Argo moved as if by breath alone. The sea stretched forward, vast, uncertain and beautiful, and far beyond, hidden in mist and myth, the Golden Fleece waited, but so did something else. Something neither Jason nor any god could have predicted. A girl of fire and fate. Chapter 4. Medea's Fire. Colchis was not a place on any map. It was a breath between stars, a hush between thunder and flame. The Argo reached its shores beneath a sky of molten dusk, clouds burning soft above jagged cliffs. Dense forests pressed against the coast, and from the hills golden light flickered. Not sun, not fire, but something stranger, older. The river phases wound through the land like a ribbon of molten bronze, and above its banks rose the palace of King Aeetes, carved from black stone, with towers like the horns of a great bull. Jason stood at the bow, the salt of months etched into his skin. Behind him the Argonauts readied, but not for war. This was not a place for battle cries. This was a place where silence mattered. He stepped onto the shore alone. At the gates of the palace, Aeetes greeted him, tall, dark-eyed, with a voice like steel wrapped in silk. The king welcomed the crew, offered wine, figs and places to rest, but his smile did not touch his eyes. "You seek the Golden Fleece," he said over dinner. "Then earn it. Yoke my fire-breathing bulls, plough the field of Ares, sow it with dragon's teeth, and fight what grows." The hall fell still. Jason bowed. "I accept." That night, as moonlight lay soft over the stone corridors, someone watched him from the shadows. Medea, daughter of Aeetes, priestess of Hecate, wielder of flame and root and whispered stars. She had seen many come for the fleece. All had failed. None had knelt, none had looked kind. But Jason, he was different. Not in face or fame, but in the way he listened, the way he did not boast, the way he held silence as if it too were sacred. So, as the palace slumbered, Medea came to him. She wore no crown, no cloak, only a robe of deep green, her hands stained with herbs. Her eyes were gold, not bright, but burning. "I can help you," she said. Jason rose, not startled, as if he had been expecting her all along. "Why?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "Because I am tired of guarding a prize I no longer believe in. Because I dream of a world where power is not weighed in gold. And because—" She looked away. "Because I see a different kind of fire in you." She gave him a vial of potion to anoint his skin against flame, a charm to soothe the earth. And her hand, not in love, not yet, but in defiance of a fate not chosen. The next morning the arena blazed. The bronze bulls snorted smoke and flame, their hooves cracked the earth. Jason stepped into the ring, shining with the oil Medea had given, heart steady. He did not fight them, he moved with them, watching their breath, their rhythm, letting the fire wash over him. One by one he yoked them, not with chains, but calm. The field was ploughed. Then came the teeth, sharp as prophecy, buried like secrets. Jason scattered them, and from the soil men grew, fully formed, armed, snarling. But Jason did not run. He remembered Medea's words, let them see themselves. He threw a stone into their midst. Confused, they turned on each other. Mistaking ally for enemy, they fell, not to sword, but to shadow. The crowd gasped. Aeetes clenched his jaw. Jason had succeeded, but the king had no intention of keeping his word. That night, Medea came again. "They will kill you," she said, "and your crew. My father will not surrender the fleece." Jason touched her hand. "Then we take it." They crept to the grove of Ares, where the fleece hung from a sacred oak, glowing like captured sunrise. It shimmered gold, not like treasure, but like warmth. Beneath it coiled the dragon, vast, silent, eyes like burning coals. Medea stepped forward. She sang, not a lullaby, a spell drawn from marrow and moon. Her voice did not echo. It entered the dragon's chest like breath. The beast's eyes blinked, blinked again, and closed. Jason climbed the tree, took the fleece, held it to his chest. It was not heavy, it was not light, it was everything they had become. They fled before dawn, Jason, Medea, and the Argonauts sailing swift beneath blood-coloured sky. Aeetes' rage lit the hills, but the sea opened. Behind them the dragon slept, before them the wind stirred, and in Jason's arms the fleece pulsed like a heartbeat. They had what they came for, but the cost was not yet counted. Chapter 5. Return with the fleece. The sea greeted them not with thunder but stillness. As the Argo slipped away from Colchis beneath the veils of twilight, the ocean opened quiet and wide, as though the gods themselves were holding their breath. Behind them the hills glowed with fire, not from sunrise, but from wrath. Aeetes' rage lit torches across the cliffs, his soldiers scouring the woods and shore in vain. But the Argo had left, like a dream sliding from a troubled sleep. Jason stood at the helm, the golden fleece wrapped carefully in cloth beside him. It shimmered faintly even beneath layers of wool and linen, not just a symbol, but a memory made visible. Medea stood nearby, her hands clasped, her face turned not toward what they fled, but toward what lay ahead. They had the fleece, but no one aboard spoke of victory, because the sea was not finished with them. Their escape had come at cost. Jason knew this. So did Medea. For in aiding the Argonauts, she had not simply turned her back on her father. She had cut the thread that bound her to Colchis, to home, to history. And in doing so, she had bound herself to something else, to the ship, to the crew, and to Jason. Some among the Argonauts did not trust her. They whispered of sorcery, of shadow. But Jason silenced them not with command, but with clarity. She came with truth when none would. She gave us fire to walk through fire. Let her speak and live as one of us, or we are no better than those we fled." And they did. Medea kept to the stern in the early days of the voyage home, stirring herbs into water, speaking softly to the wind. But her silence was not sorrow. It was care. She did not need to speak often to be heard. Her presence was a tide, quiet, steady, undeniable. The gods, however, had not yet finished testing the crew. First came the Isle of Talos, a great bronze man left behind by Hephaestus, protector of Crete. As the Argo approached, Talos hurled stones the size of oxen, roaring not from anger, but duty. No spear could fell him, no flame could melt him. Medea stood at the bow, hair caught in the salt wind. "Do not strike," she said. "He is not evil. He is wound too tightly to his purpose." She raised her voice, not in command, but in song. She called to his heart, to the single vein that ran from his neck to ankle, sealed by a bronze pin. Her voice wove through the air, not as music, but memory, drawing his gaze, slowing his steps. And when he knelt, trembling, she whispered a final word. The pin fell loose. Talos fell like a mountain into the sea. No cheer followed. Only the quiet realization that power wielded gently is the rarest kind. The sea carried them onward. In time, the stars above began to tilt once more toward Greece. Familiar birds returned to the sky. The crew laughed again, not as conquerors, but as survivors. At last, the shores of Iolcus appeared, green hills rising from the blue, olive groves swaying as if they remembered Jason's childhood steps. The city gathered to see them dock. Word had spread ahead of them, as it always does in stories. They came bearing garlands, flowers, flutes. Children rode on shoulders, women wept. And yet Jason felt no triumph. He stepped onto the dock, not as a prince returned, but as a man changed. He carried the fleece beneath his arm, not high, not flaunted, but carefully, as one carries something that still breathes. Peleus awaited them on the steps of the palace. His hair was whiter, his robe heavier, but his eyes still sharp, measuring. "You return," he said, and with it Jason unwrapped the fleece. The crowd gasped. Golden light spilled like dawn onto the stones. Peleus smiled, but it was tight, false. "A bargain, then," Jason said. "You made a vow. The fleece is here, the throne, mine." Peleus tilted his head. "A vow made under different skies," he said slowly. "What is a throne but duty? You've been gone long. You are not ready." Jason's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Medea stepped forward. "I have words for your ears alone, King." Peleus blinked, curious, suspicious, but he nodded. They disappeared into the chamber behind the throne. No one knows what was said, not truly, only that when they emerged, Peleus looked pale, and days later he was no longer king. Jason did not speak of what happened. He claimed no vengeance, no blood stained his hands, only time. Jason was crowned beneath the same fig tree his mother had once sung beneath. The people cheered, garlands fell like rain, but Jason looked not at the crowd. He looked at the Argo moored in the harbour, still, patient, as if waiting for more. Because something had shifted. He had what he came for. but he no longer knew if it was what he wanted. He ruled wisely, justly, with Medea beside him, not as ornament, but as oracle. She tended the sick, she taught the children to name stars, and for a time there was peace. But peace, bought with journey, is rarely still. The crew of the Argo drifted apart. Heracles left for distant trials. Orpheus wandered with his lyre, chasing echoes. Atalanta vanished into the mountains. And Jason? He visited the ship often, sitting alone in her shadow, listening to the sea. One night, as wind whispered through the rigging, he spoke aloud. "I wonder," he said, "if the fleece was ever the prize." And the ship, or the wind, or perhaps something older, answered not in words, but in feeling, no. The real treasure was never gold. It was the crew that rowed without question, the woman who sang to dragons, the silence he had learned to carry. Years later, Jason would sit by the sea alone, grey at the temples, the fleece long since lost to time and tale. And when children asked about the quest, he would not speak of monsters. He would speak of trust, of stars that led home, of how the sea gives, but always asks for part of your soul in return. And some say, when he died, quiet, alone, beneath the keel of the now rotted Argo, a breeze stirred the golden thread still tied to his wrist, and carried his last breath toward the eastern wind.